Care for a little game, waitress? A seemingly harmless question. But that night, it triggered a memory buried for 8 years. A poker game between a white billionaire and a black girl from the projects suddenly turned into a courtroom without a judge. She sat down like someone being humiliated. But when she stood up, the entire room bowed their heads. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or excluded just because of where you're from or the color of your skin, this story isn't just for you, it is you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the stories that touch hearts and shake societies. Because what's coming next is the truth flipped open like the card in her hand. Care for a little game, waitress? The voice cracked through the air like a slap, sharp and smug amid the shimmer of crystal and crimson wine. A 62-year-old white man, tuxedo crisp, face carved with power and entitlement. Charles Wentworth, real estate tycoon, host of the so-called charity poker night atop a Manhattan penthouse, raised his glass and smirked toward the young black girl standing quietly in the grand hall. "Come on, sweetheart. Show us how the project kids play poker." Soft chuckles from the guests. Glasses clinked. The distant piano played, all of it blending into a symphony of condescension. Naomi Bennett, 17, white shirt, plain, tray of cocktails in hand. She stopped, didn't speak, didn't bow. She just looked at him, unblinking, with the silence of someone who's had too much taken and was waiting for the exact moment to take it back. No one there knew. She was the daughter of Raymond Bennett, the man Charles once had thrown into prison under charges of corporate theft. No one knew. She'd studied by candlelight after the power was cut, learning how to count cards by the rhythm of her father's breath. No one knew she wasn't there to serve. She was there to play a game no one saw coming, and no one would ever forget. Because sometimes, the strongest card isn't on the table. It's in the eyes of the one they underestimated. Naomi didn't answer Charles that night. She was used to being ordered around by people who believed they were born above others. At just 9 years old, Naomi had stood frozen at the school gates as police handcuffed her father, Raymond Bennett, right in front of stunned classmates and teachers. A kid shouted, "Yo, is that her dad? Did your daddy steal server parts or what?" She didn't cry. She just stood there, watching the silhouette of the man being pushed into the police car and memorizing every smirk, every cruel laugh around her. That night, their tiny apartment in the Bronx was pitch dark. Naomi's mother sat curled in a corner, sobbing silently. Mice scurried beneath the kitchen cabinets. Naomi lit the last candle they had, placing it beside an old photo of her father holding a hand of poker cards at a small-time tournament. She didn't fully understand the game, but she understood that look in her father's eyes. Focus, resolve, fearless. That was where it began for Naomi. No computers, no teachers, just memory and a pain that had never learned how to scream. From that day on, she trained her mind to count cards, read people through their eyes, feel pressure through their breath, just as her father once taught her back when he was still free. No one knew. In that dark apartment, a poker prodigy was growing. And so was a vow, unspoken but unshakable. "One day, Dad, I'll get it all back. Not with fists, but by making them remember me forever." The grand hall shimmered under baccarat chandeliers. Ball gowns, tuxedos, red wine swirling in crystal glasses. It all looked like a play where the elite performed for their own reflection. Naomi moved quietly between tables. No one noticed who she was. They only saw a silver tray and a server's uniform. She blended into the room as if she'd never existed. At the center, Charles Wentworth stood tall, glass raised, his eyes lit with amusement. "Here's my offer. If this girl can beat me in just one hand of poker, just one, I'll donate $50,000 to, I don't know, some community center in the projects or whatever." Laughter erupted. Some guests even clapped, as if it were part of the evening's entertainment. A woman whispered, "This might be more fun than the violin performance earlier." But Naomi didn't laugh. She looked at Charles, then around the room. Every judging gaze, every mocking whisper, every stare that saw her as a different species, a stage prop summoned for the amusement of a philanthropic masquerade. No one knew. She hadn't come to play. She'd come to prove that no amount of money in this room could buy back the dignity they'd stepped on. Want to give away 50 grand? She thought. Fine. But you'll pay with your pride. The poker table sat in the center of the hall, solid mahogany, brass trimmed with intricate carvings, laid with black velvet like a stage for royalty. At its heart, a pearl inlaid deck worth $10,000, each card catching the chandelier's glow like cut glass. Naomi stepped forward, each movement light as wind. No one made way. No one welcomed her. She pulled out the chair herself, sat down, silent, like someone summoned, only to be the night's amusement. Charles sat across from her, one leg crossed, eyes gleaming with the smug confidence of a man who believed he'd already won before the first card was even dealt. He looked at her the way an audience watches an animal perform behind a cage. But there was something he didn't know. For the past 6 years, Naomi had played poker every night, alone. No computers, no mentors. Only memories of her father, faded photographs, and whispered lessons. Poker is strategy, but victory begins in silence. She practiced bluffing by standing in front of a mirror, learning to control every beat of her heart. She learned to read people through their eyes, just as her father had taught. When they stare at the card too long, it means they don't trust themselves. Naomi wasn't there to impress. She was there to remind of a truth Charles believed had been buried, along with the prison sentence he once orchestrated. The game hadn't even started, but destiny was already clenched in her hand. She wasn't playing to win. She was playing to remember, and to never bow her head again. Naomi lowered her head and touched the deck, like a sacred ritual. Her face calm, composed. But in her mind, each card became a fragment of memory that had never faded. She remembered the small room where her father, Raymond Bennett, once sat, his back against the wall, 2 worn decks on the table, and a candle flickering as wind slipped through a cracked window. He picked up a card, held it gently toward her. "Tell me, Naomi, what card is this?" She guessed. Wrong. He smiled, laid it down, and leaned closer, whispering like it was a secret spell. Poker isn't about the cards, it's about the people. You don't have to memorize the odds. You just need to watch, really watch. Their eyes, their breathing, the way they place a chip half a second too slow, or lick their lips before they call a bet. Naomi could still feel the brush of his hand, like he passed something deeper than skill into her, an instinct. And now, at the table tonight, between the clinking glasses and scrutinizing stares, Naomi was back in that night. But this time, there was no candlelight. No father beside her. Only her. And the words he left behind, "You don't need to grow up to win. You just need to look truth in the eye and never blink." And now, Naomi's eyes were wide open. Calm. Unblinking. Ready for a game, not to win money, but to reclaim everything that had been stolen. Charles dealt the cards like a king, diamond-ringed fingers gliding over each one, as if orchestrating the fate of those beneath him. He smiled, swirled his red wine, then leaned back into his chair, glancing at Naomi like victory had already been sealed. From the very first card, he bluffed like it was second nature. Big bets, aggressive plays, without even checking his hand. Laughter rippled around the table. Guests clapped, patted Charles on the back, like they were watching a maestro perform a well-rehearsed concerto. Naomi was different. She folded, then folded again. Silent. Composed. Unmoved. Some guests started yawning. Others turned to whisper among themselves. Someone muttered, "Guess the girl doesn't even know how to hold a hand." But Naomi didn't care. Each time she let go of the cards, she looked deeper at Charles, at the way he tapped his fingers on the table without thinking. at how he glanced at his cards, then immediately shifted his gaze to the crowd to perform his confidence. She was collecting data, building a map in her mind, his heartbeat, the space between his fingers, the speed he moved his chips. This wasn't a friendly poker game. This was theater. And Charles had no idea. He was the one being performed. Naomi wasn't in a rush. Because those who've spent a lifetime always winning are the easiest to unravel. A single card slipped from the table, sliding onto the velvet carpet beneath her feet. Naomi bent down to pick it up. A moment that seemed meaningless opened a door she had tried to keep locked for years. As she looked up, her eyes caught the exact moment Charles adjusted, his glasses on the bridge of his nose. A casual gesture, familiar, habitual. But the way the light glinted off the lenses made Naomi freeze. Those weren't regular glasses. They had a special coating, the kind used by professional poker cheats, to read markings made with invisible UV ink. She had read about them, watched old training tapes, seen them once in the evidence photo from her father's case. A chill crawled down her spine. Naomi gripped the card tighter, the paper edge slicing lightly into her skin. This was how he did it. This was how Charles Wentworth had sent her father to prison, staging fake crime scenes, planting marked cards, and using tech to turn the innocent into thieves. Naomi took a deep breath. She placed the card back on the table, slowly. Her eyes no longer scanned for tells. Now they held the focus of someone who fully understood who she was up against and why losing was no longer an option. She came to reclaim her father's name. But now she had to expose the truth. And the only weapon she needed was her own eyes. Naomi's hand began to tremble. Not much, just enough for a few people at the table to raise their eyebrows. She placed her chips off-center, forcing herself to adjust them with 2 awkward taps. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes blinked at irregular intervals. A few soft chuckles rippled behind her. A woman whispered, "Adorable. Must be her first time playing somewhere this fancy." But Naomi wasn't flustered. Every move was deliberate. Every flaw, a mask. Inside, her mind ran like a cold, calculating machine. She was reading Charles, the dilation of his pupils when he held a good hand, the twitch of his lip when a bluff landed, the triple tap of his finger when he felt unsure. She was turning him into an open book, page by page, dot by dot. Charles, still basking in his own bravado, was falling into the very psychological trap he had used to humiliate hundreds before. But this time, his opponent was a girl who knew how to wait, how to watch, and how to collect arrogance like a weapon. He's losing to himself, Naomi thought. And worse, he doesn't even know it. She didn't need to bluff. Didn't need to raise her voice. All she had to do was sit there, like a storm pretending to sleep. And slowly, the entire room began to shift its gaze toward her. Charles stared at the river card, 10 spades, and his lips curled into a victorious smile. Full house, a monster hand, almost unbeatable. He tapped the table lightly like an actor closing a scene. All in, the crowd erupted. Some began clapping even before Naomi reacted. She looked at the mountain of chips pushed toward her. Silent. A slight nod. No words. She called. Her cards were turned over, one by one, slowly. Spades. 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 Charles froze. His breath hitched, off rhythm. Then Naomi placed the final card on the table, softly, like laying down a blade. 10 spades. Royal flush. The perfect hand. Unbeatable. And without needing a single word, the entire room fell silent. Charles sat stunned, motionless, as if waiting for someone to tell him this was just a dream. Naomi looked up, eyes locking with his. Not with defiance. Not with mockery. Just the cold, unwavering weight of truth, spoken with the even tone of destiny, I learned from the man you framed. No one laughed. No one poured another drink. Because in that moment, everyone understood that hand didn't just defeat a man. It shattered an entire system that thrived on looking down at those it deemed beneath them. Just as Naomi laid down the final card, and the room remained frozen in silence, a hoarse male voice rose from the back of the hall. I can't stay silent any longer. Every head turned. An older man, gray-bearded, slowly stood. No tuxedo. No badge of wealth. Just a worn-out vest with frayed cuffs. My name is Roger Baines. I used to be the head of the engineering department at Wentworth Industries. The air seemed to crystallize. 8 years ago, I witnessed Charles Wentworth frame Raymond Bennett, this young woman's father. He switched employee badges, planted hardware into Raymond's tool bag, then called security. I know because I saw it with my own eyes. But I was afraid. His voice cracked. Naomi turned to look at him. She didn't know the man. But the look in his eyes, the weight of a man who had lived with guilt, she recognized that instantly. I've carried my cowardice for 8 years. But tonight, when I saw Naomi reveal her hand, I knew it was time to reveal the truth. A second explosion hit the room. Not from anyone's mouth, but from collective realization. A truth unearthed. A confession delivered amid opulence. And a testimony. Powerful enough to drag an empire off its throne by the very crimes it once buried. Naomi stood up. Not in haste. Not in anger. Just a single, precise movement, as if she had just completed a ritual she'd been preparing for half her life. Charles remained seated, frozen, his hands gripping the armrests, his eyes lost, like an animal cornered in its own cage. Naomi looked at him. Not with hatred, not with triumph. Just a gaze, one that pierced through every layer of counterfeit power. You played to humiliate me. Her voice rang out clearly through the absolute silence. I played to get my father back. No one laughed. No one poured another drink. Some bowed their heads. A woman wiped away a tear with her silk handkerchief. In that moment, the mahogany poker table no longer belonged to the rich and playful. It had become a courtroom without a judge, where justice wasn't handed down by a gavel, but declared by the intellect and unshakable will of a girl the world tried to crush. Every gaze turned to Naomi was no longer filled with mockery or curiosity, but reverence, a feeling deeper than surprise. They were witnessing something real, a real person, a real pain. Naomi didn't cry. She had shed enough tears in the dark. Tonight, she simply stood there, a living indictment. And the man across from her had just signed his name at the bottom. Charles stood up, but his legs faltered, as if even the floor had decided to stop holding him up. No one reached out. No one looked at him as the host of the evening. Only eyes followed him, eyes of contempt, discomfort, and cold silence, trailing behind each step like the first sentence passed on a man who had built his life on lies. By morning, headlines swept across major newspapers. Black prodigy defeats real estate mogul in high-stakes poker showdown. 8-year-old truth resurfaces. Naomi Bennett brings Manhattan to its knees. The Wentworth Industries Board held an emergency meeting. Stocks plummeted. Sponsorships were pulled. 3 decades of reputation collapsed in 3 hours. Meanwhile, Naomi, now called by the media the silent gambler, received a full scholarship to NYU, majoring in game theory and cognitive science. But what moved people most wasn't her victory, her fame, or her future. It was the way she chose not to seek revenge. Naomi didn't sue. She didn't disgrace Charles on live television. When asked during a national interview, she said only one thing: I didn't come to destroy him. I came to restore my father. She chose not to strike down, but to rise. Not with hatred, but with truth as her final hand, and the most beautiful one she ever played. 3 months after that fateful night, Naomi didn't show up at elite galas. She declined offers from investors who wanted to turn her into a brand ambassador. Instead, she used her scholarship funds and support from a group of NYU professors to launch a project called Queens of Strategy, a free program where young black girls, the ones often labeled unintelligent, undisciplined, unfit, were taught poker, logic, debate, decision-making strategy, and public confidence. Not to become card players, but to become players of life. Naomi didn't want girls like her to learn everything in the dark the way she once had. She wanted them to know intelligence isn't anyone's privilege. It's a fire. All it needs is a spark. In a live interview on CNN, the host asked, "What made you sit at that poker table that night, knowing you might lose?" Naomi looked straight into the camera, her voice unwavering. "I didn't play to beat him. I played to beat the fear, the pain, and the condescension that society placed on my shoulders." She spoke not just for herself, but for millions who had ever been looked down upon. And in that moment, those millions felt seen, felt heard, felt represented. On the first day of the Queens of Strategy program, the small room inside the South Bronx Community Library was packed with young girls, eyes full of anticipation, hands clutching notebooks tightly. On stage, Naomi stepped forward, white shirt, radiant face. But as she glanced down to the front row, she froze. A man was standing, slowly, steadily. Thinner now, shaped by years behind bars. But his eyes still shone, just like they always had. Raymond Bennett, Naomi's father. The entire room erupted into applause. But he didn't smile. He simply stepped forward and wrapped his arms around his daughter. And in that moment, the outside world ceased to exist. There was only father and daughter, two people who had once been stripped of dignity, trust, and the right to live like everyone else. "You restored honor to our name," Raymond said, his voice raspy, trembling slightly. Not with rage, but with brilliance. Not with force, but with integrity. He said nothing more. But the tears streamed down a face once stained by shame, now being washed clean by pride. Naomi rested her head against his chest. No one in the room could hold back their tears. Because it wasn't just the embrace of a father and his child. It was the embrace of a generation once buried, now resurrected by the courage of the young. He wanted her to be a spectacle. A fleeting moment of amusement at a $1 million party hosted by the powerful. A cruel joke designed to entertain through the embarrassment of a young waitress from the projects. But Naomi Bennett didn't just sit down at the poker table. She stepped into it like walking into a courtroom where no one had bothered to bring a lawyer. And in the hush of a glittering Manhattan night, she turned every card she flipped into a living indictment. No shouting, no rage, just composure, just strategy, just the unwavering rhythm of a heart once shattered and still beating for justice. The royal flush wasn't just a win. It was a symbol that when someone's been pushed to the very bottom, they don't need to scream to be heard. They just need to stand and look into the eyes of the one who once dismissed them, the way Naomi did. Every card was a memory. Every hand was a slice of truth. And every glance she received that night was an apology this society never had the courage to say. This story isn't just about poker. It's about honor, intelligence, memory, and the triumph of those who are always underestimated until they rise. Because here's the truth. Checkmate doesn't need a chessboard. It only needs a heart that refuses to bow. Maybe what left us speechless wasn't that Naomi won, but how she won. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with the calm of someone who had endured more than most and still chose to believe in intelligence, in justice, in human dignity. She didn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't need power to be believed. All it took was one hand and a truth that couldn't be denied. I don't know where you're sitting right now, what you've been through, but if you've ever had to stay silent, ever been pushed aside, Ever been told you were less than? Then you too are holding a card, just waiting for the right moment to play it. Don't let anyone write your story if you still have a voice. If this story touched something in your heart, subscribe. Because here, we don't tell stories just to entertain. We tell them to see ourselves and to make sure no one walks through the dark alone.